Today we're Metaverse. When the online interactions are not rated by the ESRB, how do we as parents actually find out what what is appropriate for our kids when it comes to the activities that they spend most of their time online doing? Today we're going to be talking about three different aspects. I want to talk a little bit about ESRB ratings to begin with. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Section 230, what's being done in that space in the US. So this is US law. And then I'm going to talk about a new AI Accountability Act, which I think is quite interesting. So if you're joining us for the first time, my name is Dr. Ed, and I'm just a geek dad who's obsessed about the future. And what I'm trying to do is help companies transform their practices so that they can avoid things like cancel culture that will come if they are not aware of taking the right kind of precautions. And as somebody who works in the field of privacy, and I've worked a lot with privacy law, international privacy law, I found that this is a practice that is becoming more and more important. People are starting to realize that their data is very important. We just had another article this week, actually, that the CIA was doing a little bit more scraping of information, of personally identifiable information, off of existing sites under an executive order. So, what's different about this rating from the CIA was that it actually, how do I describe it? It it was something that was, instead of just like having a regular type of contract where it's out in the public, we know that Patriot Act, and we know that there is this type of monitoring going on. This was not regulated. This is kind of hidden, and it was only because of existing practice that it was exposed. And so that's something that we want to be aware of more and more. People are saying, like, we can trust the government way less with our data these days than we could in the past. And I think that that's important, is to understand like how things are changing. So why don't I just show you what that article looks, because it was the Alberta Civil Liberties Union that was showing that. So let's pull it up. Why not? Ron Wyden from the Senate. Yes. There we are. How should I do this? Maybe if I make it bigger? That does not make it more clear at all. All right. Zoom in that way. So here we go. Wyden and Heinrich. Newly declassified documents revealed previously secret CIA bulk collection. Problems with the handling of Americans' information. So the senator is calling for critically needed transparency about the CIA bulk collection documents declassified at Wyden and Heinrich. And this is just this week, like February 10th. So it was just last week. Very interesting, right? So they requested declassification of some privacies and civil liberty oversight board on the CIA bulk collection program. And they wanted to learn a little bit more about Executive Order 12333. And this is the one that recently they realized that, oh, actually they are tracking, they are doing bulk collection as well. And so I won't get into too much of the details here. I think that, if you want, I can give you a link and then point to it. But this is really key. We're getting to a point where some countries are saying that the data from, like, basically data in the United States cannot be trusted. It is highly likely to be under surveillance. And so we need to be more aware. So you can imagine, as a parent, like, you would be very concerned. What am I doing to make sure that my children are protected, and make sure that everything is taken care of? Well, for that, we have the ESRB. And so I think this is the Entertainment Safety Ratings Board. And They often carry like a notice for different types of ratings, and I will bring those up. And I think this is really important because this is how we as parents generally decide. Oh, okay, this is appropriate. Like when I'm watching a movie with my kids and my wife, she's saying, "Well, okay, well, what is the rating? Oh, it's this rating, right? Like PG-14, not appropriate. Like we can't watch this one with our 7-year-old or our 8-year-old." And we depend on these ratings. So it's worthwhile to look at who makes these ratings. What are these ratings about? Because this information helps us decide what is and is not appropriate for our kids. And so what's the best one? Oh, I like this one. So there's a couple documentaries on it. Should I bring up the ESRB article first? Yeah, maybe I'll do that one. Okay, so let's use this one. I like this one. Yes, this one's a good one. Sorry, let me bring it up. Boom, here we go. I'm gonna do this. No. Okay, a little bit more. So if you go to the Entertainment Software Ratings Board, you will see that they have a number of rating categories already. So things such as E for everyone, E10, so everyone 10 plus, teen, mature, adults only, rating pending, which means they haven't rated it yet, rating pending, also likely mature. And so those are the different categories. And that's what we're mostly familiar with. We see these and we're like, okay, great. But a lot of people do not realize that of course, they do a rubric. They look for various categories such as alcohol, blood, cartoon violence, crude humor, fantasy violence, animated blood, blood and gore, comic mischief, drug reference, and intense violence. So that all of those things end up being a part of this rating. However, and this is a key point. I should go back. There's one aspect of these ratings which is not included, and that's your online ratings. And generally, the reason for this is potentially like some people, like I looked on a Google search of this would find maybe some Quora questions like, how come the online interactions are not rated? And you would think, oh, well, maybe it's because they can't predict what people will be able to say online. People could just say anything. They could say bad words, for example. They could say hateful language, hateful speech to other people. Yeah, that might be a reason. No, it's not the reason at all. It turns out that the ESRB is not a organization that was created, say, by the government. The ESRB, was an organization that was created by the movies and the games industries themselves. And it's a voluntary, self-governing regulatory system that with the goal of preemptively regulating and censoring, like to preemptively regulate and remove certain parts of the community so that the government doesn't have to come in and censor them. They knew that this was coming. They knew that something was coming, so they knew something had to be done. That's what this is. Okay, so specifically, they refuse to rate it because it would potentially discredit this stamp of approval and potentially make an opening for government censorship of all games, because they're really concerned that, oh, if we like try to rate online interactions and then somebody has a really bad experience, then our whole rating system is going to go down the tubes. And so there's a few documentaries and articles about how the rating system works that points to some of the flaws in it. And I thought it might be good to just look at that this title, and I'll bring it up, and then you can tell me what you think about it. This is really old, by the way. This film is not yet rated. It's a 2006 video, and I'm just gonna show you the trailer for it. So here we go. Uh, play with this. And what can I do? Can I make it bigger? Yes, I can. Excellent. Here we go.
For 35 years, a secret group has controlled the way you see movies.
There were clergy in the room.
These are moral censors.
They forced great filmmakers to change their art.
I was so devastated.
I got the call and they said NC-17. That's when my blood turned to ice water.
Because the studio won't release your movie.
No advertising budget. You can't run TV spots.
No one's ever found out who they are.
Who is controlling this thing and how are they controlling it?
No one knows. That's the whole point.
Until now.
We're actually hiring a private investigator to try to find out who these people are on the board.
It's time. The MPAA got a rating of its own.
The MPAA is that pinkish color building. There's absolutely no way of going in.
When an Oscar-nominated director
Here's somebody.
and a private dick
They're gonna all start coming out. We'll take some plates. That's the camera.
It looks just like a little butt.
dig deep
Oh, a lot of women. We need to go for this.
I'm gonna put on my safety belt.
He's not even looking. I got him. Right there. Got a raider.
to expose Hollywood's dirtiest secrets.
Whoa! One woman is topless, breast exposed. So what I don't understand is who's counted the Do you ever do interviews at all?
No.
I'm already divulging a lot here. At some point, I think I have to draw a line.
For seeing my pubic hair, we get an NC-17.
Violence is fine, sex isn't.
You almost got us caught. They were going, look at that man. Is he filming us?
Discover the movie
You are dealing with a very powerful censorship group.
Hollywood doesn't want you to see.
I'm going to say the F word. It's the fascist system.
This film is not yet rated.
Hi, is this the MPAA? I'd like to submit my film for a rating. It's a documentary. It's about how films are rated.
Censorship gets fucked.
All right. So that was this film is not yet rated. And it's about a different rating system, not just about, oops, probably hearing some sound, hold on. Of course it's going to start playing the next video. Stop. Okay, now it is stopped. And so this is a little bit about like how the ratings currently occur for the ESRB. Now, there are some examples of not trusting the rating system, like where the rating system itself has failed. So there's a game, Oblivion, that had a original rating of teen, so it was appropriate for teens, but then later it had to change its rating to M when the game was censored without modification. And so essentially, like you could toggle the censorship. And so people just removed the censors. And so the game got an M rating. GTA has had the same problems. So Grand Theft Auto had the same problems with the hot coffee mod that got the game rated adult only, forcing a reprint to lower it to M, which like forced the ESRB to change the way that they rate things. But this is the thing about games, is that ideally you want to just set one rating and you just want to stick with it forever. You never want to change the rating. And that is really hard to do. It's really hard to do because things change online. People can introduce mods. Games are dynamic. They are not this regular thing. So, okay, so now we've got this problem, right? So we're talking about the ESRB ratings. And if you have any questions, of course, would love to hear about what you're wondering about. What are you curious about? You can post a comment just in the chats. We'll respond live. That's what we want it to be interactive. We want you to be learning with us today. And so because I was just talking a little bit about the ESRB, I'm going to move on, and I want to talk about the Section 230, because Section 230, for those who are not familiar, is the main legal mechanism by which the most like tech companies regulate their actions. And essentially, if you look at Section 230, the rules allow companies to treat themselves as kind of like the bookshelves for content, where yes, we just host the bookshelves. We don't actually create the content in the books. So we are not responsible for user created content. And this is the mechanism by which they can essentially remove all liability. Section 230, for those who are not familiar, was created when I think it was CompuServe. Yes, there was a lawsuit specifically about rating content, and what they found was that this is kind of crazy. Like, some companies would be responsible for the type of content that they moderated. And so the law was changed so that they wouldn't become responsible for this moving forward. And that is kind of they call it the section of the law that created the internet. And so there's been various attempts at modifying the Section 230. And for the most part, we have seen very little movement, because there's a lot of movement against any change there. So let me see if I can pull something up. If you think about this, think about the lesson learned from the ESRB. Here they're saying, we need to do this change. We need to introduce this rating because we know that the government's going to censor us if we don't do anything. We cannot just leave it there. So we're going to create this board. We're going to try to manage it. Well, what's interesting is the government is aware of this, and they are actively trying to manage online interactions. We know that legislation related to this is happening right now. It's in the pipeline. One of the things that is changing is that the companies themselves are coming in and saying, oh, well, why don't we create our own rating? And similar to in this case, the video I just showed you was the MPAA, which is the Motion Pictures Association of America. They have a rating for movies, and the video game industry has their own rating system as well. And so we expect that maybe there needs to be an online interaction, type of rating system, and it needs to be introduced by companies before. Okay. So let's see. Yes, this one. Big businesses. So this is a good article, and I like it. It's an article from Protocol, and maybe it's a little bit older, but it still relates to how is this being dealt with at the industry level. And I think that being aware of what is happening is very important. So here we go. Boom. Oh, what happened? Okay, switch back. Yes. You watch something and then it's all good, and then they throw up the ad. Come on. Here we go. Try again. So big businesses want flexible and limited AI regulations. But of course they do. And so here they're saying that, the Business Roundtable called on the US government to establish practices and rules. Oh, I got to zoom this in a little bit so it's easier for you to see. Including updating existing rules and laws. So the recommendation for the regulator should craft targeted and flexible governance and oversight that account for the evolving nature of AI, employing an agile and collaborative approach to AI governance, which is code for you basically listen to what industry says. An adaptive approach to enforcement that focuses the effort on bad actors. This notion that, and this is a key narrative, you'll see this term bad actors over and over again. So whenever you see that, keep in mind what they're trying to essentially say is that it's not our fault that these kinds of things are happening. It's just a few bad actors. It's just a few extreme right-wing individuals who are choosing to write this hateful content. And I want to be super clear. This is false. This is a lie. This is not true at all. In fact, yes, there can be hateful content, and there is hateful content on all platforms, but it is the algorithms that amplify this anger, that amplify this hateful content that is causing the problem. So when you create an algorithm that specifically looks for engagement, that specifically looks for how many comments, how many likes, how many shares, how many retweets of a particular post, what is going to be most retweeted, most liked, most commented on is going to be things that are extremely hurtful and hateful. And they know this. They know that this is happening. They're not going to do anything to change it. So the narrative is to shift this to bad actors. Bad actors are the cause of our problem. They are the perfect scapegoat in this area. Don't believe it. Follow along. So we'll keep going. The group wants to limit new regulations. Of course they do. The government should assess regulatory gaps before considering new regulations, and they should narrowly scope the new rules or guidance to address the gaps. And so, of course, some businesses are already starting these practices. Should be no surprise here. And so the key here is that the government is having some real dilemmas because AI is an area that is changing very rapidly. How do we regulate it? And the companies are saying, well, we've got a solution for you. Just let us rate ourselves. We'll make it flexible. We'll make it good for business. And a lot of citizens, parents are saying, no, this is not appropriate. This is not okay. We don't want the rating to be done that way. And so enter what we call the Algorithmic Accountability Act of 2022. And to me, this is the thing that I find the most exciting is the Algorithmic Accountability Act of 2022. So this act, and I guess I could bring it up. Nah, should I bring it up here? I'll bring it up later. So it was an act that was sponsored by Oregon Democratic Senator Ron Wyden. And it would give the FTC more technology staff to oversee the enforcement and let the agency publish information about the algorithmic technology that companies use. So the algorithms that are used by social media companies are often the ones that are in a regulatory spotlight. However, all sorts of businesses, like from home loan providers, like to banks, they all use algorithmic services to make automated decisions. And this is the key. Automated decisions is the thing that we're going to focus on today. In an effort to enable more oversight and control of these technologies that make discriminatory decisions or create safety risks or other harms, this bill would require companies to deploy automated systems to assess them, to mitigate negative impacts, and submit annual reports about those assessments to the FTC. Now, I want to be clear, this Algorithmic Accountability Act is proposed legislation. It is not the law yet, and there's going to be a lot of resistance to this one. But I think the reason I want to highlight it is because I think it is definitely a move in the right direction, and it is where AI accountability and rating systems is likely going to come from. This is the kind of language that you should expect in any future legislation about AI. Maybe it's not here yet, but it's coming, and we need to be thinking about and ready for it. So essentially, the legislation calls on companies to conduct these algorithmic impact assessments on those systems. And I'm familiar with privacy impact assessments because you want to go, oh, I'm transferring data to the United States. So what's the impact of sending that information to them? I think this is a good practice. It's kind of a mental exercise, but it doesn't hurt. But in particular, companies using automated systems would be on the hook if they made more than $50 million in annual revenue or are worth more than 250 million in equity. So we're talking about big companies, right? Like you got to be making more than 50 million a year. And you need to be worth more than 250 million. So this is not small business. We're not talking small business. We're talking big enterprise that have the capacity to do these kinds of things. And they have to have identifiable data, like personally identifiable data, on more than 1 million people, households, devices used in automated decisions. So that's cool. Like this is big corporations. This is the people that the corporations that we really want to hit. So this essentially means a large number of companies in like healthcare, in recruitment, human resources, real estate, and financial lending industries would all be required to conduct assessments of the AI that they use, right? And so we realize it's not just social media. There's a lot in the healthcare and the insurance industry that uses AI. They need to be accountable for those. And so the problems with previous versions of this legislation was that they use this term high-risk systems. Well, what does high risk mean, and who decides what is high risk? This was not good. This was really bad language that could potentially create these massive like loopholes. So what they decided to do instead is they decided to look at the term critical decisions. So a critical decision is something that really has an impact. So, okay, I use an AI in order to tell you what kind of movies you should watch next on Netflix. So your maximum liability would be what? The amount that you paid for your Netflix subscription. But if it's being used by to determine a prison sentence, for example, and we find that, there's a lot of bias in this prison sentence, and it's like this person gets life in prison because the algorithm told him so, then that liability is huge. That could be that person's livelihood, for 10, 20 years. And so you'd be liable for what that person would potentially earn for that period. So it's about the critical decisions that impact. So if we focus on the decisions that are made automatically, then we have kind of guidance towards a really strong algorithm, like a way of evaluating algorithms and keeping companies accountable for the automated decisions that they make. So of course, the FTC, they're proposing in this legislation that the FTC would produce annual reports that show trends, the aggregated statistics, and lessons from anonymized cases and updated guidance. Plus, the FTC would publish the publicly available repository of information about the automated systems that companies provide reports on. So hopefully there's a little bit of accountability, right? Algorithmic accountability. So that's, just want to be super clear. That's what we're talking about right now. Boom. So essentially, the FTC would be the ones in charge of making the rules for the algorithmic impact assessments. And if the bill passes, then the agency, which is nice, is already geared up for this task. In fact, the commission brought in members of a new AI advisory team, I think this was in September, that have worked for the AI Now Institute. And for those familiar, it's a group that's been critical of AI's negative impacts on minority communities and has already helped propel the use of algorithmic impact assessments as a framework for evaluating the effects of the algorithmic systems. The co-founder of AI Now is Meredith Whitaker, and she's a senior now she's been hired as a senior advisor on AI at the FTC. So this to me is very exciting news, but it happened a few months ago. So maybe people are already familiar, but if you're not, Meredith Whitaker, I heard one of her talks about bias in AI, and it was phenomenal. Like I learned so much in that period. And so as a parent, it just kind of made me aware. It's like, wow, like all of the kinds of bias that we talk about today online, they happen online and they're even worse. Like things, the things that we talk about in real life, like in our society, we talk about, wow, there's a lot of bias in how the rules are set up. And when we look at the world of AI and the online world, it's the same, if not worse. And there's not a lot of people bringing attention to it. So I'm really glad that she was one of the people who could talk to this issue. And so I'm going to try to bring it up. Here it is. Yes. Okay. Come on, let's go. Okay, so I like this. And it's a nice photo, actually, of her. So in this protocol article, it says, how will this AI critic influence Biden's policies? The clues are hiding in plain sight. This was a November article. So 2 leaders from NYU's AI Now Institute recently joined the Biden administration and have already laid the groundwork for what government AI policy could look like. And so this one is this is Meredith Whitaker. She has a great track record at AI Now, and she's now providing some advice for the FTC. There's one other person as well to be aware of. Let me see if I can find her. Rashida Richardson. She's a law professor who served as director of policy and research and has a background in studying the impacts of AI systems like predictive policing tools. So that's really good because that can really have a long-term impact on you. And she joins the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy in July as a senior policy advisor for data and democracy. And so this, I think, is like a step in the right direction. I can't say like we've seen the change. We know how difficult implementing change is, especially when you are a minority voice. Like you could be somebody who is a real strong advocate, but then you're surrounded by people who just want the status quo. And we've seen that happen before where no change occurs. So I'm cautiously optimistic. And I think that's all that we can be at this point is cautiously optimistic because we do not know really what is going to happen here. So okay, algorithmic accountability, all of this rating. So where do we go from here? I think that really what we need is a type of rating that makes it easy for parents. Like, despite all of the work of this Algorithmic Accountability Act, let's be honest, most parents are not going to read this, right? They're not going to go and dive deep into, oh, how does this work under the hood? And so it is important for us to come up with, or I see one of the rules that we have within AI parenting is we need to be focused on how do we make that easy for parents to understand. What kinds of bias should you be expecting from this? Like, let's make it explicit. What kind of algorithmic bias? What kind of decisions are being made by this algorithm? And what are the risks associated with it? And my feeling is if you have an API for a way to program this, it should be fairly easy to implement some system that will check for bias and constantly update it to make sure that the ratings are up to date, that it does in fact check for bias. And so you should know, like, well, what kinds of things does it amplify? As a parent, you should go, okay, why do certain things appear in certain feeds? Yes, like online interactions, there can be anything, but is there any filtering? You write in the chat and you write like really hateful language. Is there any checks for any of that stuff? Or does it just go straight through? That's a problem, right? Like there's no moderation in terms of a lot of online chat. If you do a voice chat and you start saying something that is hurtful, what is the mechanisms by which you tell the company, hey, this is not appropriate, the kind of language that's being used here, right? Like, is there a ban system? I think all of these things are pretty important. And I would also say that when I was looking at the algorithm, like, so there's like Snapchat has filters. And I've been really interested in augmented reality for a long time. I've been thinking about even this channel itself, like how can I make it more like AR? So should I do a few episodes with like my face as like some kind of AR system? I think that would be an interesting thing to explore, and Snapchat has some development tools for that. In fact, they have a development tool specifically for creating these types of filters. And in it, they have ways of testing it. And you can see people with different skin colors. You can see people of different genders. And so it tells you that, oh, they're thinking about diversity in their own algorithms. So I think that's important. And if I test it against people of different color, I should be able to find a bunch of examples of like faces of different colors. I should be able to test that as well. And so I think that is a really interesting aspect that we want to have that level of transparency. So as a parent, I just look at it. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this one is appropriate. This tells me what's inside. And so we do the work for them. And ideally, it's somebody independent. It's not somebody who is in the company, because we know how effective that works. Like things slip through all the time. And so it should be an independent board, or it should be an independent organization being responsible for that. So I think that, to me, that's the part that is really interesting about this. And so let me know if you have any questions. If you're wondering anything, you can just pop it into the chat, into the comments. I'd be happy to cover that in one of today or in one of my future live streams. Pull this up. So we just finished algorithmic accountability. Yep. Okay, cool. And while we are here, I want to cover just one or two more other things. How are we doing for time? Do I have enough time? Okay, I can cover like one last thing and then I gotta go. So I talked about the CIA, and I talked about the types of tracking that are done. I also spoke to the Algorithmic Accountability Act and the ESRB ratings. And would this be going too high level if I talk about this? So there is a book. Okay, I'm going to bring it up anyways. So let's see if I can bring this up. So this one is called The Political Philosophy of AI. And I found that this is an interesting approach to talking about AI, not just as a tech thing, but think of it as politics. Think of it as, well, why do we care about these things? Why does like algorithms, AI, like what's the point of all of this accountability? And to me, this is the most important part. So in this book, he talks about like this notion of freedom is changing. What is freedom? Right? And how free are we really on any of these online systems? The reality is they do a lot. They have a lot of impact on us. They have a lot of control over us. And so they talk about this notion of manipulation and manipulation by the AI, right? Like we're told to go to the extremes. This is normal for how AI works. And there's also this notion of robot slavery. So if I am a social media influencer, I'm essentially a slave to the robot. This is very different. Or if I work on any freelancing platform like Fiverr or Upwork, I am a slave to this. So there's a new type of slavery, but it's like humans being slaves to a robot, as opposed to humans being a slave to another person. And of course, like they talk about equality and justice. So in that book, they also talk about, I should look this up. and put it onto the stream as well. Yes. Okay, so hold on a sec. The political philosophy of AI. There it is. Boom, just added it. Haha. So just want to be clear, that's the one I'm talking about right now. Boom. Live stream. Come on, let's go. There it is. Okay. So we need to talk about, of course, like equity and justice. What does that mean in a world of AI? We need to look at things like bias. We need to look at things like discrimination by an artificial intelligence, because they're starting to make a lot of decisions about us, for us, and these decisions, these critical decisions, can make a big impact on our lives. They can affect us long term. And then there's another aspect, which is, of course, when it comes to democracy, there's this notion of echo chambers everywhere. Oh, there's like, it sounds like an echo chamber, but it's not an echo chamber. It's a anger accelerator. Okay, keep that in mind. There's no such thing as an echo chamber in online media. It's amplified. Okay, so it's an anger accelerator. And machine totalitarianism. It's kind of where the machine rules all, right? And like your ability to question the machine is very limited. The example would be, let's say you're on Fiverr, right? And you have a dispute about it. Well, often there's very little you can do if the algorithm just decides, no, we're gonna let like customer like is always right. You know, you are not able to dispute it. You can't do much about it. And so there is little recourse that you have besides quitting the system and then going to another system. And so this is why I say that in this new world of AI, data is your vote. Your data is your vote. And in the same way, the understanding AI and the algorithms, what happens underneath, is like the law, is like understanding the law. And so if we create more transparency around what happens, especially so, for example, like there's the Algorithmic Justice and Online Platform Transparency Act of 2021 that would require platforms to maintain records of how their algorithms work. I mean, I don't think that that's really going to, that's something that is going to appear in law, just because it's revealing a lot of trade secrets, and, you know, there's a lot of things that would like, there's a lot of actors that would resist that. But when it comes to power, it's important to understand the importance of surveillance, because everybody slips up every once in a while. So if people can surveil you, they have way more power over you. And of course, this self-disciplining, I've described it as the cancel culture, right? So like you get this massive, like, oh, I said something really like racist or really hateful online, and now I'm experiencing the consequences of that. Through my own data that I've provided. And of course, we need to look at just even the things like the impact on our environment from all this technology. And we have to look at a little bit about what happens when people aren't involved. Like, what if it's all automated? And so there's a tipping point known as the singularity, where AI becomes like better than humans. And it's been proposed for years, and they said, oh, it's coming. And I feel like, no, we have to worry about a lot of other things before that. Like today, for our own kids, you know, yes, that kind of stuff may happen, but that's not really the focus of companies right now. Look at where they're spending their effort and time. It's like, it's to get you to keep looking at the display. And so, you know, focus on those attention algorithms, or focus on the ones that are making decisions today, because that's going to lead to the precedent of how we handle the algorithms that we see in the future. And so in his book, The Political Philosophy of AI, he talks a little bit about political, like technology as like political technologies. And increasingly, politicians are turning to social media in order to make their message clear of what they stand for and what they don't stand for. And there is a new level of transparency for our online influencers. You get to not just see like kind of the best version of them, but you get to see how they are through the ups and the downs. And I think that's really important. Like people feel that this is the thing that leads to more authenticity. It leads to more paying attention. I think that this like there's a scarcity. There's a scarcity of authenticity online. Everybody is the best version of themselves, and everybody like lies about who they are and what their life is like. And I think that it's leading to a type of distancing of people because it is vulnerability that creates connection. And it is like this kind of feeling of perfectness that is the thing that pushes people away. And so, because it's not human, right? Like we are not to err, to be human is to err. Or to make errors. And so I think that we need to start thinking about AI in new ways. And so I referenced a bunch of books here. Like to me, Algorithms of Oppression by Safia Noble. It's a pretty good book. I read that one. And when I read it, I thought, okay, yeah, I get it. Like I can see how it is having an impact. I actually thought Weapons of Math Destruction was really good to talk about what was the impact of data. And there's a lot of it leading up to the financial crisis in 2008. We depended so much on data, but data is only good at repeating the past, right? And so if something happens, even for an AI that is outside of the scope of what it is trained to understand, it doesn't know what to do. The behavior is unknown. And that is where a lot of the risk is. So she describes it as a weapon of math destruction, simply because we don't know. It's this ticking time bomb, just waiting for some kind of input that is not part of the data set that has been trained on for it to basically blow up. There's also The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, another book that is really good that talks about essentially it's the surveillance component that is making the most money. Companies' valuation is essentially based off of the amount of money the amount of users that they have. Each person is worth like, I don't know, $20 or something, lifetime value. And so that's put into the valuation of that company. And so a company can be making no money or making no profit, but they can still be worth millions or billions of dollars just based off of that valuation. And so it's kind of like a new form of, hey, I've got more data on people. And that's the type of capitalism that's going on. So with that, I want to encourage you, if you want to learn a little bit more about this stuff, I'm going to be starting a masterclass soon. I want to talk a little bit about this rating systems. I want to talk a little bit about becoming more AI aware. You want to learn a little bit more about it, go and visit our site, aiparenting.live. It's live because this is like a live stream, just like today. And go and check us out. Go and check out our site. If you like this video, hit like, comment, subscribe. Put something into the chat. Just let us know if this was helpful for you. Let us know what you found useful. And of course, at any time, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. And we are here just to answer any questions that you might have. Anyways, I have to run. It's the end of my time, and I will catch up with you soon. Thank you, and take care.